It's a nice new annoying Zoom feature. So thanks for coming to this Wednesday's Law Practice Management webinar. Whether you're listening live or more likely on archive, we're happy to have you with us as we discuss IT and data security, everybody's favorite subject, right? Well, we're going to make it really interesting today. We've got Chris Thompson with us from ExactIT, and I'm going to give Chris a moment to introduce himself, and then we'll go into the format of today's episode, and we'll move from there. So, Chris, thanks for coming in today. You want to tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, hey, Jared. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. My name is Chris Thompson. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for an IT firm here in Indianapolis called ExactIT Consulting. And we've been around about, I guess we're going on our 8th year. And we help small to medium-sized businesses stay secure and maintain their IT infrastructure and user support.
Sounds pretty good. Everybody needs IT infrastructure and user support. I can vouch for that as somebody who works with attorneys on a regular basis. So what we're going to do today is have a conversation, a little back and forth about cybersecurity issues mostly. And then if anybody on the call has any questions, feel free to ask those questions. What I would ask is that you add those questions to the chat. I'll watch the chat. I'll have a little notification if anybody types in anything in there. Now, the reason we just don't have everybody come in and ask questions directly is because we're trying to reduce the noise level for folks who are going to come in later and watch the archive of the program. So everybody's muted. Everybody's video is turned off except for mine and Chris's. But if you have questions, feel free to drop those into the chat, and we can make this an interactive conversation by doing so. So, Chris, I kind of teased this a little bit. We're going to talk about cybersecurity in part, which is everybody's favorite topic. I know lawyers love talking about this, business owners do, right? So let's start by identifying some of the issues. So I'm sure people have been reading the news, right? Ransomware is a big deal. There's a new news story on ransomware every week. Politicians are getting their phones hacked left and right. And I think a lot of lawyers take this to mean, oh, those are like big business problems or public figure problems, not my problem. I'm too small to hack. Why would I even do anything anyway? It's going to be too expensive. We'll get into all that stuff, but let's first start by identifying the threats and how those can or would affect law firm business owners.
Certainly. I mean, some of the primary threats include data breaches, and data breaches can be, just stealing sensitive data for resale, customer name, social security number, credit card numbers, addresses, anything that you can sell to open up a credit card in somebody's name or something to that effect. Cyber crimes are big, and basically those are insider threats. Those can come from either current or former disgruntled employees that have access to your information and can gain access for somebody on the outside. Phishing is a big thing right now, and phishing hacks basically are scams that they come in as emails that look like legitimate emails from, let's say, your bank or a vendor that you commonly do business with. And again, those are geared towards gaining confidential information from your business. Email hacks. This one is probably one of the scarier ones for me, because if someone hacks your email, let's say, not only do they have the ability to read all of the emails in any of your folders, but they have the ability to send emails on your behalf. So they can now create emails, send them to clients, send them to whomever. Those emails are coming to those people from your email address. And then they would respond accordingly. So any kind of confidential information that you might discuss through email now is in the hands of those people.
And you could theoretically go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Well, you could have someone impersonating someone else, right? Sitting in a desk in the Ukraine, messaging you back and forth as if it was another attorney. And if you're not 100%. Careful about this, it'd be hard to identify that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because essentially they've gained access to your email account, and they're sending and receiving emails from your account. So,
and that's a little bit different.
And then the last
back in the day, right, when the worst that could happen is someone would send out a Viagra advertisement on your behalf. This is a lot worse
Yeah.
than that and a lot more dangerous.
Yes, they've become much more sophisticated these days. So, and to your point earlier, the ransomware is the most, probably the one we hear about the most right now, because these attacks basically lock all of your data and prevent you from accessing any of your files. And essentially, they hold you hostage until you either pay the ransom, or hopefully you have the proper backups in place and you're able to restore from that. So
Yeah, that it's interesting that you make that point. I don't know that a lot of law firms would necessarily lump data backup into part of their security system, but it could play a significant role, especially if you're talking about a ransomware attack.
100%. I mean, backups are, aside from prevention, backups are the most important thing that you can do, because even if, let's say, a ransomware comes in. Now, sometimes these things will sit dormant on your machine for, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before they become active. And the reason they do that is because they know if they go active immediately, you can immediately quarantine, go back to the day before, restore from your backups, and not lose any data. So by sitting dormant, by the time you know about them, you have to restore from backups prior to when the virus came in. So unfortunately, you're still going to lose, or potentially, lose some of that corrupted data in the time period from when that virus came in to when you can restore. But it's still better than losing everything that you have throughout the history of your practice.
Right, much better. Now, in terms of all these threats, one myth I want to dispel is that any of these attacks could occur against any size business, right? There's no business that's too small, including a small firm, to become a victim of these attacks. Okay. Now, I know you have some interesting data about how often law firms get hacked.
Yeah.
I think a lot of lawyers just think, again, that's big business, that's non-law entities, or it's big firms. It's not my problem. But a pretty decent number of law firms are getting hacked on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, in 2020, there was 29% of law firms that reported some kind of cybersecurity breach, and that was up 3% from the year 2019. The interesting thing about it is a lot of these processes are automated. And so basically what happens is they're creating whatever form of cyber attack they want, and then they're just pushing it out and letting it run. And they're hitting websites. So the interesting thing is that they're not specifically targeting any vertical or any size company. Basically, they're targeting vulnerabilities. And they figured out from now that they can capitalize from gaining access to any organization, large or small, any vertical. It doesn't really matter. And so what they're doing now is they're just targeting vulnerabilities. And so the highest percentage of businesses and verticals that we see getting attacked are the ones that we see the highest percentage of vulnerabilities in. And that could be Windows 7 machines that aren't, they're no longer supported.
Right. If you've got Windows 7, upgrade. It's time to upgrade.
Exactly. Thank you. Please.
Well, it's
that's been our mantra.
Oh man, yeah, it's time for Windows 10 at least. I guess in terms of this aspect, what's interesting is I talk to law firms a lot about how automation can help their practices. But as a hacker, you can use automation to attack multiple businesses at once, and you gain the same advantages that a law firm would gain, like less people involved. You can attack more folks. So this, I think the takeaway in part for me is that I think this whole infrastructure is a lot more complex than the average business owner would realize.
Yeah, I mean, the Are you talking about from a hacker perspective?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I think most of the I mean a lot of law firms I talk to, the idea is that you've got hackers who are like teenagers sitting in a bedroom in the Ukraine, right? But a lot of these are sophisticated organizations that are using automation and tools that law firms maybe well, automation tools that law firms maybe could be using
certainly.
but aren't, to take advantage of
Yeah,
businesses on a large scale.
right. Yeah, 100%. And from a ransomware perspective, I mean, of course, the ones we hear about are the $1 million ransoms in the news from the
Right.
pipelines and the meat companies and things like that. But a lot of the ones that from government organizations like small municipalities, small hospitals, businesses. I mean, some of these organizations are paying $5,000 to $8,000 to get their data back. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but to a small organization who hasn't budgeted for an $8,000 hit, it is a lot. But the hackers don't care. They just
Right.
made $8,000 for basically doing nothing other than pushing this thing out onto the web, waiting it to hit somebody, and then getting an email back that says, "Hey, you got me. What do I do?"
Right.
You
Right.
know. So if they
Um,
can do a dozen of those in a month, that's a pretty good life for those guys.
well, and then the other thing is if you've got a small business, like part of this is that the data breach just doesn't happen and go away. Like a significant number of
Mhm.
small businesses close following data breach, right?
Correct. Yeah, the fallout is. Yeah, that's interesting you say that because there's a lot of monetary amounts put behind what a data breach costs, but there are some intangibles that they don't really account for. So, obviously, if there's a ransom that's paid, if there's a cost to, rebuild your network, replace hardware, that doesn't really take into account for, the um, time that you're down, your loss of production, the the credibility that your organization takes, by it becoming public knowledge that you've been hacked or you have a data breach, the trust that your customers have. If you're unable to respond to, incoming calls, I mean, especially in the legal vertical, if you don't call somebody back immediately, they're going to, they have a need right now. They're going to call somebody else. So you
Right.
just lost some potential revenue by not being able to respond to a potential new customer client.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's so many knock-on effects to this.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about how these breaches occur, right? In some
Mhm.
cases, it's human error. In some cases, a more active campaign against a business. Like, how do these break
Right.
down in terms of percentages, and
Yeah.
how does that all work?
Yeah. So the smallest percent, about 4%, is physical action. And that's actually stealing a laptop, a cell phone, a portable storage device, some kind of, you're actually taking physically that device out of somebody's possession and then getting it into your own environment and hacking into it. Unauthorized use is a big one. And this is something that any of our new customers that we always recommend, and that's improper employee access. The not the proper policies put in place to limit people who don't need to be able to see certain data from
Right.
being able to see it. And that's basically, we use something that's called Active Directory. Probably a lot of people have heard of that, but that enables you to assign permissions, to limit that access and basically put it in buckets so that like if you're in the accounting department, you can only really see the stuff that you need for accounting.
Mhm.
If you're on the legal side or if you're an admin, basically you can assign permissions to each of those departments, but it also allows you to turn on and off access. So if you have a disgruntled employee or somebody that you're going to, let's say, terminate at the end of the week, you can turn their access off, at Friday on a 3 o'clock, pull them into a meeting at 4, and then they don't have time to go back out to their desk and access all the stuff that they want to get before they leave. Or if you find out somebody is doing, you can immediately just, deny their access right away. And basically it gives you, the business owner, control of who has access to your network.
So it's not only about identifying those roles and closing out parts of your data sets initially, it's also about actively monitoring breaches as well. And those are, you have to cover for both those components.
Right. And I mean, it boggles my mind to see how many law firms and just individual companies that we support when we come in. They have contractors, they have part-time employees, they have a whole range of different people that have full access to all the information and all the files on their network.
Oh, right.
It's like, okay, this is the Wild West. We need to rein it in for them. Right?
Yeah, and that's probably the default for most small businesses, I would guess.
Unfortunately, it is. Then we move on to, of course, malware that we mentioned. About 17% comes from malware, and those are basically programs that get installed on the device that are going to just kind of run quietly in the background. They're going to be, RAM scrapers, key loggers, things that are going to try to, to glean as much data as they can without being detected.
Yep.
And usually what happens, you'll see a degradation in that machine's performance. It'll become slow and sluggish. It doesn't respond as quickly. It's because that's running in the background. And that's usually when we get a phone call, if it's not a supported customer, and they say, yeah, I need somebody to look at this machine because it's just not running. And we get in there and we're like, yeah, you got something. So we can, at that point, remediate it.
Just out of curiosity, are those firms running anything in the background, like antivirus software or anti-malware software?
Some. What we find, though, is a lot of times they're running like a home version. So, something that you could, pick up like and not that they're bad, they're just not enterprise level. So the updates aren't being pushed out regularly. You have to manually do them.
Right. Yep.
And so it's something that you would buy, $149 for the year, for a McAfee or something to that effect.
Right.
And
you want to make sure that you're covering from malware if you're buying any kind of system, right? That's an important takeaway here as well.
Right.
I think.
The biggest thing with antivirus is a code that's written specifically for viruses that are known, right? So a virus gets pushed out, the antivirus company finds out about it, they write something that protects against that, and then they push it out to all their customers.
Right.
So those updates aren't getting pushed out or downloaded. That virus is free to do what it will. Even though you have that antivirus on your machine, if it's not updated to the most current virus that's out there, it's free to do whatever it wants.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. But you've got some other scenarios in which the data.
Yeah. So social engineering takes up about 22%, and that's basically hackers. And those are someone that are trying to, use emails or text messages or even phone calls to gain access or personal information from your business or your customers. Mm-hmm. And then there's criminal hacking, which is about 45%. It's what we see the most. And those are people that are gaining access through malware, weak unprotected passwords, or even open ports. Open ports is a huge one. A lot of people have no idea about open ports, what they need to do,
Starbucks
how to protect.
And, get the Wi-Fi, right? So easy.
Exactly. So, that's one of the first things that we do is we do a port scan. We make sure that all the ports that are active are being used, and any that aren't being used are closed down. So
that's great. All right, you got one more on your list, right? I think.
No, criminal hacking was the last one on there. So
all right, we got through a lot there. All right, so now that we've officially scared everybody, shall we turn to how to reduce your risk of being hacked, and then what happens if you have a
Sure.
breach. So let's first start with
Yeah.
like reducing your risk for hacking. I think that's a great place
Yeah.
to turn to here. And then I will tell everybody as well, we got about 10, 15 minutes left on the program today. So if you've got questions, feel free to pop those in now. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, you're fine. So obviously encryption software is a big one, especially in the legal profession. You definitely want to make sure you're using something like that to send emails and documents. Excuse me. Strong firewalls. Again, we see a lot of Best Buy firewalls and things of that nature. Those are more home use. They're not really designed for business use. And
Well,
with the
so you've
firewalls,
said
not
that a few
only,
times, right? Like, so what I think people
yeah,
should understand is that like there are different subscription levels for any type of software, including security software.
mhm,
It's the home version, which is often the cheapest, and then the business or enterprise versions, which are more expensive. Now, if I had to guess,
right,
this is somewhat of an educated guess, these small business owners that are using these home versions just don't want to spend as much money. But even if you have to spend
basically.
twice as much, because these are not super expensive, it seems like it's worth it to do so.
Yeah, I mean, there are really, really good firewalls out there that you can get for, $300-400, which, compared to, again, a Best Buy firewall that you can get for $149 or something to that effect. It does seem like a lot, but when you're talking about, the security of your business, it doesn't seem like all that much at
Right.
the end of the day. So. And then in addition to having a good firewall, this is something else that we see a ton. Change the password. We see we see a lot of firewalls that we come in and the password is the default factory set password, which is like
Oh, really?
admin123.
Oh, geez.
And so it's great you have a firewall, but anybody that just knows what the default firewall password is, they can hit it in and like, oh yeah, they never changed their password, and it's like you don't even have one. So
Not great.
basic stuff,
Yes.
but yeah, I agree. Like we said before, a great enterprise antivirus software. We use something that's called endpoint detection response, and this is a second layer on top of the AV, because like I said before, the AV responds to known threats that
Right.
are out there.
Yep.
The endpoint detection is actually it uses an algorithm, it uses an AI that looks for things that maybe aren't known. It looks for patterns. It looks for things that are outside of your patterns, and it can red flag certain things that maybe it's a new virus, maybe there's not an update for it. This will
Mm.
flag something to that effect. So it's just another layer. Um, this sounds really basic, but strong password combinations are huge. I mean, just having a good password, and
Yep.
that's not your birthday, that's not your your last name or something to that
Or
amount. Password
password
one two
even.
three four.
Right.
Yes, we still see it. We still
And
see it.
using different
Uh,
passwords for each account as well, right? That's something that
yeah,
you see a lot of people who are not using password managers just drop in like the same password for 17 different accounts, which somebody gets access
right,
to one,
right.
the very next thing they're going to do is try all the other systems.
All the other ones, and you can even have like a if you have a really good core password, you can make modifications to that password for different accounts. So you can like make changes if it's a LinkedIn. You can make it, password LI and then like a number, something or other. So
Right.
that LI just designates it's your LinkedIn password, but it's in a place within that password it's hard to discern from somebody who's just trying to randomly hack it.
Right.
But the rest of it all kind of stays the same, so you don't have to memorize completely different passwords across all of your applications.
Yeah, it's a great tip.
Yeah. Again, strict access controls for personnel who are in and out of your network, and then using secured Wi-Fi. So those are the biggest things that you can do to prevent it. The National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, They have a cybersecurity framework that you can review. And then the ACC recently came out with a data steward program also. That's kind of just, those are both just kind of best practices of what things you should be doing on a basic level to protect your network.
Yeah, that's a great thing to look at. Yep.
The last one, and
yes.
I promise I'll move on, but the last one,
No, that's fine. Go ahead. This is the best one, right? That's why you saved it to the end.
This is it. Education. Education. And the more that you can educate yourself and your staff to, if they see something out of the ordinary, if they see something that they don't think that, that doesn't jive, ask somebody. If they see an email that's like, should I be sharing this information, or should this person be asking me this? Before you respond, before you click on a link, before you do anything, just verify it. Pick up a phone. Hey, did you send me this email? Did you ask me for this information? Simple as that. And if the answer is no, you delete it, you quarantine it. Obviously, it's a bad deal. So, but yeah, those are the basics.
Yeah, that was a great set of suggestions, I think. So we probably got another 5 minutes, I think. Don't want to be cognizant of everybody's time. We usually do about half an hour for these things, but I want to get to the worst case scenario. This is a lawyer thing, right? Lawyers always deal in the worst case scenario. How do we fix that? Yeah. So let's say you do get breached, because the vast majority of people are going to get breached at some point, at some level. Correct. And you can talk about that as well. What do you do next? Obviously, after this, you go apply all the stuff you talked about before, but immediate responses, what do you do?
Right. So, I mean, ideally you would have somebody supporting your network that you would be able, if say something happens, you discover, you see your mouse randomly moving around on your screen or something to that effect. First thing you would want to do, disconnect that device immediately. You want to quarantine whatever machine is infected or has been hacked. You want to quarantine it, get it off of the network so that it doesn't doesn't reach out and infect all the rest of your devices that are also on that network. Second thing you want to do is you want to contact your technical support team immediately, because what they're going to do is they're going to come in, they're going to identify where it came from. Again, quarantine it, make sure it didn't get deployed to any other machines, and then they can put in steps to remove that and remediate. Hopefully you've got good backup solution in place, a good disaster recovery, so that we can, you can identify when it came in, you can go back and restore prior to that so that it's completely off your network. And then unfortunately, with the code of ethics and all those things, probably the last step, once you get everything back under control and you know that the infection is quarantined and mitigated, remediated, there's a responsibility to notify any clients or anybody that may have been impacted by a data breach.
Right, and there are state laws on that in pretty much every state at this point, including
Correct.
Indiana.
Yep.
That's a good list. All right. So, hey, that was pretty good. We're at 2:32. I thought this was a ton of helpful information. So let me ask, last time around, right? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Anybody got any questions for Chris? Pop them into the chat. He'll answer them. Now, Chris, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, one of the things you mentioned before was it's great to have a partner in this, somebody who can monitor what's happening in your business and make sure that a breach doesn't happen or prevent it. If people want to reach out to you, how would they do so? What's the best way to contact you or your team?
Email's great. I'm at chris@exactitconsulting.com. Our website, we have a ton of opportunities for you to reach out or connect or chat or any of those things, and it's ExactITconsulting.com. So
awesome. All right, I don't see any questions coming in. I'll give people a few more seconds here before they do. before I shut this thing down, but contact Chris. He's been great today. Chris, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been fun.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. I don't see any questions coming in. Contact Chris directly if you have any, whether you're listening live or on the archive. We'll see you next Wednesday at 2. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.